Kalimera σας. Good morning. The question of ancient Greek metrics in ancient Greek poetry, is of course directly related to the pronunciation of language in ancient times. The pronunciation in the archaic and classical period was very different from the way we pronounce Greek today. Mainly, in questions of phonology, especially vowel phonology, the basic distinction is between a long syllable, a long vowel, and a short vowel, makro and vrachi, as we say in the ancient Greek terms. There are vowels which are short and other vowels which are longer. And ancient Greek meter depends on the interchange, the combination of longer and shorter syllables. It is this combination that produces the sense of rhythm. It is something very different from the modern rhythm of our language and generally the rhythm in European poetry, in the poetry in the Western world, which relies on stressed and unstressed syllables. In ancient Greek poetry, stress seems to have played no part. It was mainly the alternation of long and short syllables which produced the effect of rhythm. It is very difficult, of course, to capture this now and reconstruct it, although there are languages which preserve this kind of differences in the quantity of vowels, but still we can try and at least try conventionally to reconstruct the way that ancient poetry would have been pronounced. The meter which is based on the interchange of long and short syllables is actually a heritage from Indo-European. It seems that the distinction of long and short syllables and the poetry based on their interchange was a feature of the original Indo-European language, of the Indo-European peoples before they were separated and descended to the various areas. For instance, one branch of the Indo-Europeans descended in Greece and gave rise to the Greeks. Others were in Persia, in Iran, the Iranians in India, and all that. So we see, for instance, the same kind of meter, which, as we say, it's based in prosody. Prosodic meter is exactly the meter which is based on the interchange of long and short vowels, long and short syllables. The same kind of prosodic meters is in Sanskrit, in the ancient language of India. Sanskrit poetry, classical Sanskrit poetry, is also written in this kind of meter with long and short syllables. For instance, in the most ancient religious texts in Sanskrit, the Veda, the religious texts of the ancient Hindu faith, the Veda is written in rather short lines of 8 to 12 syllables, where long and short vowels interchange. They're somewhat similar to some of the meters we have in ancient Greek lyric poetry. For the epic literature of ancient India, the great epics such as the Mahabharata or the Ramayana, they developed longer longer lines, what the Indians call shloka. Shloka is actually a distich, 2 lines of 16 syllables each, and the syllables alternate between long and short. The equivalent of the shloka in archaic Greek poetry is the dactylic hexameter. The meter, the dactylico hexameter, the dactylic hexameter, the meter in which Homeric poetry and afterwards all epic poetry on the ancient world is written. The dactylic hexameter is a very old fabrication. It must have been in use in oral heroic epic poetry already in the Mycenaean age. Already during the acme of Mycenaean civilization, the period between 1600 and 1100 BC, when the Mycenaean palaces and their culture flourished in mainland Greece and the islands, there seems to have been a tradition of oral epic poetry sung. There was nothing written then. The Mycenaeans had a rudimentary system of writing, but it was only used for administrative texts, not for transcribing poetry. Their poetry was exclusively oral. There was a tradition of oral poetry sung or recited in the halls of the great noblemen for the entertainment of the noblemen and the people. We can actually be quite certain of this because in the Homeric epics, there are lines which do not scan, their meter does not seem correct, unless we imagine the form that the words would have in Mycenaean Greek. Only if we transcribe the line back from Homeric to Mycenaean morphology, only then does the line scan and is the hexameter correct. This means that even in Homeric poetry there are relics, lines or groups of lines which must have been bequeathed from the very old Mycenaean tradition of epic poetry. And this is an indication that already in the Mycenaean age there was poetry in the dactylic hexameter. The dactylic hexameter is a long line appropriate for the epic and for actually the poetics of the epic, a long line which is appropriate for the large, broad epic narrative. It consists in prosodic meter in ancient Greek. We have combinations of long and short syllables, a particular combination of a number of long and short syllables, usually 3 or 4, makes what we call a pous, a podas, a metrical foot. And a combination of a number of such metrical feet makes a line, a metron, as we say. The dactylic hexameter is 6 feet, which are dactyls. It means 1 long syllable and 2 short. Tom titi. But the dactyl may also be replaced by a spondios, which is 2 long syllables. To illustrate this, I have in the page I have distributed one small piece from the Odyssey of Homer. It is from the episode of the Cyclops, when the Cyclops actually grabs 2 of Odysseus' comrades and kills them and eats them raw. It is actually sometimes, I think, that maybe the first time, in Mycenaean time or even in archaic time, in Homer's time, all the epic poems, the epic chants would have been recited or sung, usually in feasts, as we see in the Odyssey, when the singer comes and sings the song during the feast as the people are enjoying food and drink. So I imagine, suppose that at some point they were eating and drinking, and then the singer would start reciting this episode of the Cyclops, how he actually took Odysseus' comrades and smashed their heads down and their brains were spilled out, and then he ate them raw, and so what would have been the effect on the people who were actually eating the roast meat. Anyhow, I will read this passage first in the way we pronounce Greek nowadays, and then in the reconstructed ancient pronunciation, trying to preserve the dactylic hexameter. So first the modern Greek. Ως εφάμιν, ο δε μουδέν αμείβε τον ηλέη θυμό, αλλό για να ήξας ετάρις επιχείρας ίαλε, συν δε δύο μάρψας ως τε σκύλακας ποτιγέι κόπτ, εκ δε εγκέφαλος χαμάδης ρεέ δεύε δε γέαν. Τους δε διάμελειστήτα μόνο πλήσα το δόρπον, ίσθι εδώ στελέον ο ρεσίτροφος, ουδα πέλιπεν έγκατάτε σάρκαστε και οστέα μιελόεντα. Εμείς δε κλαίοντες ανεσχέθομεν διή χείρας σχέτλια εργορώοντες, αμηχανή δέχε θυμών. Αυτά ρε επικύκλωψ μεγάλην εμπλήσα των ειδήν, ανδρόμεα κρέα έδων και έπακρη των γαλαπίνων, κοιτέντος θάντριο τανισάμενος διαμήλων. You see, in the modern pronunciation, there's no sense of rhythm, of meter that scans. Let's see now how this might have sounded in ancient Greek. Ως επαμέν, ο δε μου δεν αμέιμπετο ναι λεϊκούμοι, άλλογανάι ξάς εταρόις επί κέιρασιάλε, Synde dio marpsas hostes kylakas potigaie, copt ec denke palos camadisre deue de Gaian. Tus de diameleistit amono plissato dorpon, esti edos teleono resitropos, uda pelleipen, encatate sarcaste caiostea myeloenta. hemes de claiontes anescetomendi ceras, scetlia vergoro ontes a me canie decetymon. Autare peicu clops megalenem plesato nedun, androme acre don cae pacre ton galapinon, ceten tostan troio tanusamenos diamelon. This is approximately the feeling of an ancient hexameter with dactyls and spondees, the kind of long rolling rhythm for broad epic narrative. Now, apart from epic poetry, the narrative poetry of the heroic songs, from very old times there was also in Greek what we might call lyric poetry, that is, shorter songs which express mainly the feelings and thoughts of the composer, of the performer. We must assume that this kind of poetry coexisted with the heroic poetry of epic chants already from the Mycenaean age. It's just that we do not have any relics of such poetry because it was exclusively oral. There was no writing system to transcribe it in the Mycenaean age, and so it has been entirely lost. Yet we must assume that, at least on the popular level, there would have been popular songs which the people would have improvised, something like the folk songs of modern cultures. And there may also have been also lyric songs which were performed by individual performers, perhaps in festivals, in various festive occasions. One of the offshoots of this age-old lyric tradition in the historical times, beginning from the Archaic Age, from the 7th century BC, shortly after the Homeric epics, is what we call iambos, the iambic poetry, which is the earliest kind of comic, of satirical poetry in Greek literature. We first have iamboi, this kind of satirical poetry, with Archilochus in the 7th century, and then there is a flourishing tradition, especially in the Archaic Age. But we have to assume that this kind of satirical composition, at least in an oral or even in a popular, improvised way, must have existed from much older times. Actually, this kind of performance of the iambos is very clearly influenced by similar kinds of comic satiric performances which we can trace in the Middle East in the 2nd millennium BC. It's clear that the iambos of the Greeks has very many similarities with the kind of performer that we find in Mesopotamia and Syria in the 2nd millennium BC, and is called in the Akkadian language the aluzinu. The aluzinu, which is probably the etymology of the Greek word alazon. The aluzinu is a lower member of the hieratic personnel of a temple. He's an employee of the temple. He's not a priest himself, but he's an employee of the temple, and his role is to give comic, satirical performances during the great religious festival of the temple in order to entertain the people. In the festivals of ancient religion, humor and laughter is an integral part of the festivity. We see that also in ancient Greek festivals, from the Eleusinian Mysteries to the Dionysia. So, the aluzinu is possibly the earliest known form of stand-up comedy. Only it is inscribed in a religious festival. The performer, the aluzinu, stands before the public and tries to entertain them with various jokes which are often of a very lowbrow nature, for instance, sexual or scatological jokes. The iambos in Greece is probably a development influenced by this kind of performance. The iambic performer is someone who stands before the audience and may satirize various members of the community, use foul language, lowbrow jokes, even perform various comic roles, assume various personae. We see all that in the poetry of Archilochus or Hipponax, in order to entertain the audience and also to criticize the flaws of society. This kind of satirical poetry must have been very old in Greece, possibly already in the Mycenaean age, when the Mycenaeans had very close contacts with the culture of the Middle East, so it would have been easy from Syria and Palestine for the Alusinu performance to pass into Greece and be adapted to Greek circumstances. We first see a literary rendering of this kind of performance in the Iambos, beginning with Archilochos. So I have selected two passages of Archilochos to recite here. In both cases, Archilochos, in the first case, Archilochos criticizes social types, the various types of soldiers in his society. In the second one, he actually speaks about an experience about losing his shield in the battle and the way he actually deals with this kind of shameful experience. So the first poem is about the kinds of generals, the kinds of military commanders of the age, and Archilochos satirizes what seems to be an early form of the Miles Gloriosus, the tall general who is very impressive in looks, but in fact is faint-hearted and is ready to take flight as soon as real danger approaches. And he contrasts this with his own ideal type of soldier, a short guy with crooked legs, an ugly man who yet is full of courage and stands his ground in battle. So again, first, the modern Greek pronunciation. Ου φιλέω μέγαν στρατηγών, ουδε διαπεπληγμένων, ουδε βοστρίχηση γαύρων, ουδε υπεξηρημένων. Αλλά μης μικρός τυσί, και περικνήμας ειδήν ρικός, ασφαλέως βεβικός ποσί, καρδίης πλέος. And this time, the line is different. It is what we call the trochaic tetrameter. The lyric poetry developed a number of meters of its own, going away from the hexameter, the heroic hexameter of epic poetry, and developed a number of meters of its own, which were appropriate for recitals and especially for the satiric performance of the Iambos. This is trochaic tetrameter, and you will listen, you will see what the rhythm sounded like. Ου πηλαιό μεγαν στρατέγων, ουδε διαπεπληγμένων, ουδε μποστρικόις σιγάουρον, ουδε υπεξηρέμενον. Αλλά μόης μικρός της έγε, καί περικνέμας ιδέιν ρόικος, ασπαλαιός μπεμπέκος πόσι, καρδιές πλεός. The second passage from Archilochos is again concerned with war. Here Archilochos assumes the persona of a soldier who has actually discarded his shield in battle when a barbarian tribe, the Scyans, a barbarian tribe of Thrace, actually attacked them. He discarded his shield in order to take flight. And he deals with this kind of defection in battle in a rather nonchalant way, saying that, well, what matters, the shield is a mere tool, I can very easily buy another one and participate in another battle. It's no use of standing, it's quite obviously a criticism to heroic aristocratic ideals of battle. It's no point standing in the middle of carnage like a monolith of honor, like a Diomed or an Ajax, in order to be slaughtered by unstoppable savages. Better, if the battle cannot be won, better retreat in order to live and fight another day. So, again, the modern Greek pronunciation. Ασπίδημεν σαΐον της αγάλετε, ειν παραθάμνο έντος αμόμητον, κάλυπον ουκ εθέλων. Αυτόν δε ξεσάωσα. Τι μη μέλειας πεις εκείνη, ερέτω. Εξ αυτής κτίσομαι ουκ αχείο. Here the line is actually a development, a lyric development of the epic hexameter. It is what we call elegiac distich. It is a kind of line that was used in elegiac poetry, a kind of sympotic poetry on usually gnomic and moral themes, which was recited in the symposium. Here, of course, the poem of Archilochos is different. I suspect that Archilochos has chosen the elegiac line because it has a dactylic rhythm which reminds us of the epic, and he wants to parody the Homeric ideal of the staunch warrior who never retreats. Archilochos shows the spirit of a new age, the practical soldier in battle, and he parodies the heroic ideal, and for this reason he has chosen the elegiac meter so as to parody also the Homeric style. So, aspidi mensa iontis agalletai, hen paratamnoi, entos amome ton callipon uketelon. Auton dexesa ossa, timoi melei aspis ecenei, erreto, autis gar, ctesomai ucacio. After epic and lyric poetry, the great genres which flourish in the classical age from the 5th century BC onwards is, of course, the dramatic genres, tragedy and comedy. Tragedy and comedy are very complex genres in that they are a kind of musical drama, the earliest kind of musical drama, and the structure of an ancient dramatic play is based on the interchange, the alternation of recited parts and sung parts. We have the parts of the actors who may recite long monologues or dialogue, have dialogues between them, among them, in recited lines, in poetic meter, but without musical accompaniment. And these are interspersed with songs, with sung parts, sung either by the chorus or in mature tragedy also we have songs of the actors. And so this interchange between recited and sung, between dialogue and song, is the basic structure of ancient Greek tragedy and comedy. It is in fact a structure which goes back to the very origins of the dramatic genre in the very early and primitive Dionysiac festivities. Already in the earliest form of tragedy, which was introduced by Thespis, according to tradition, there seems to have been this basic structure, an alternation between the monologues delivered by the actor in recited verse and the songs of the chorus. And this is the structure that remains in all the history of classical drama. The choral parts are very complex. You had the previous week Professor Psaroudakis, who actually sang a part of an ancient choral ode by Euripides, which has been preserved along with some musical notation on papyrus. They are very complex. They're written in very complex meters. In fact, no choral song in ancient Greek literature is exactly similar with any other choral song. For each song, the poet writes anew, chooses the metrical units, and writes them together with the music. In ancient Greece, the poet also wrote the musical accompaniment, at least in the poets of comedy and tragedy also wrote the music for their own plays. There was no separation between poet and musician as in modern times. So they're very complex and they're very difficult to deliver. Most of the music, of course, of ancient drama has been lost. It is only by chance that we may have scraps of papyri which may preserve musical notation. Most of the music of the ancient choral odes written by Sophocles, Aeschylus, Euripides has been lost. We can only reconstruct from the meter the rhythm, approximately the rhythm of these songs, but we know nothing about their music. It is, however, very difficult, and I am not myself capable of delivering such a line even in the metrical form. What I have chosen in order to finish off this presentation today is two passages from the dialogue parts of tragedy and of comedy. The line, the main type of verse used for the dialogue parts in tragedy and in comedy, is what we call the iambic trimeter. It is exactly the meter which Thespis, according to tradition, introduced for the actor parts of his own primordial tragedies, his own proto-tragedies. The iambic trimeter was a kind of line which was developed by lyric poetry. It was a lyric line. We find in Archilochus and other iambic poets poems written in the iambic trimeter. It was a line for the lyric poetry, for satirical or gnomic poems. Why Thespis chose this type of line for his actor parts, this probably has to do with the fact that at those times in Athens there was a very popular lyric poet, Solon, the well-known lawgiver, who was also one of the most important poets of the Archaic Age. And Solon had developed a kind of poetry, of gnomic poetry, with moralizing, gnomic, even political content, precisely in iambic trimeters. Solon's poems were often actually political discourses addressed to the people of Athens on matters of morals or of politics of the city, written like long poetic monologues in iambic trimeters. So Thespis seems to have taken this type of line. He found it very congenial, seeing the long poetic monologues in the poems of Solon, so he found it very congenial to transfer it to the monologues of his own personages in his plays. And so in this way, the iambic trimeter became the standard line for the dialogue, the acto parts of tragedy and comedy. In tragedy, the iambic trimeter is more strict, meaning that there is a regular alternation of long and short syllables, and a long syllable is very rarely split, meaning that a long syllable in comedy, for instance, which we'll see, which comes closer to the everyday speech, sometimes a long syllable can be split in two shorts. This happens very rarely in tragedy. Tragedy retains a more strict rhythm, which is in accordance with its more poetic and high-style writing. So I have a small passage, which is the first lines from Sophocles' Oedipus Tyrannus. It is the scene in which Oedipus comes out and addresses the people of Thebes, who are plagued by loimos. They are actually tormented by a plague. And so it is the great leader addressing his people. Again, the modern Greek pronunciation first. «Ο τέκνα, κάθ μου του πάλε νέα τροφή. Τίνας ποθέδρας τάς δε μυθοάζεται, η κτηρίης κλάδης είναι εξεστεμένη. Πόλης δομούμεν θυμιαμάτων γέμι, ομού δε πεάνονται και στεναγμάτων. Αγώ, δικαιών μη παραγγέλων τέκνα άλλον ακούειν, αυτός ο δε λίληθα, ο πάση κλινός ειδίπους καλούμενος». And now, the way, the ancient pronunciation with the strict trimeters of tragedy. «Ο τέκνα καντ μου του παλάι νεάτροπε, τίνας ποτέδρας τας δεμόι το άτζετε, ικτεριόις κλαδόις συνεξεστέμενοι. Polis domu mentumia maton gemei, homu de paianon te kai stenagmaton. Agodikai on me parankelon tekna, allon acuen autos hode leluta, ho pasikle nosoidipus calumenos. And the next, the final passage, is a passage from a monologue of comedy. And here the trimeter is more lax, more loose. Often a long syllable, what would have been one long syllable in the metrical pattern, is divided in two short syllables. And in this way, the rhythm is in comedy, in the comic trimeter, is more lax. It approaches more to the rhythm of everyday speech. The iambic trimeter has got this kind of movement of short and long, which is, according to Aristotle, the natural speech pattern of ancient Greek. Aristotle used to say, laluntes iambizomen, laluntes iambizomen. When we speak, we actually make iambs, short, long. This is the natural rhythm of ancient Greek speech. So the iambic trimeter is possibly the kind of line that comes closer to the natural speech pattern, the natural rhythm pattern of ancient Greek. And comedy comes with its greater laxity in the line, comes very close actually to the speech patterns of the common tongue in ancient Athens. As also the style of comedy is not poetic and high style as in tragedy, apart from the passages when the comic poet wants to parody tragedy. Otherwise, the language of comedy is very close to the kind of language one would have heard in the streets of Athens. So, this passage is the beginning from Aristophanes' Clouds, where the main hero, Strepsiades, has insomnia and sits up at night and thinks about his various family troubles. It begins, as you see, with an extrametrum exclamation, iou, an exclamation of despair or great grief. Again, the modern Greek pronunciation. Ιού, ο Ζεφ Βασιλεύ, το χρήμα των νυκτών όσων, απέραντον, ουδέ ποθημέρα γεννήσετε. Και μην πάλε για λεκτριώνος, ήκουσα εγώ. Ειδικέτε ρέγκουσιν, αλλούκαν πρωτού, απόλυο δίτα ο πόλεμε πολλών ούνεκα, ο του δε κολλάς εξεστήμη του σικέτας. Αλλούδο Χριστός σου το συνεανία σε γύρεται της νυκτός, αλλά πέρδεται εν πέντε σισίρες εν και κορδιλημένος. Αλλίδωκεί ρέγκομεν εν και καλυμμένη. And approximately how it would have sounded in the mouth of the ancient actor. Ιού, ο Τζέου Βασιλέου, το κρέμα των νυκτόνωσον, απεράντων, ούντε ποτέ μερά γενέσετάι, καημέν παλάι γαλεκτριονός εκούς εγώ, hoidoi ketai rengusin al ucan protu, apolloio det opolemme pollon uneca, o tu decollasse xestimoi tu soi ketas. Aludo cresto suto sineanias, e geiretai tes nyktos, alla perdetai, en pente sisurai senke cordulemenos. Aleidokei renkomenenke kalymmenoi. And this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.